Hey everyone, Drew Dinkmeyer here at DailyRoto, walking you through a tutorial of our NBA Customizable Projections along with our NBA Optimizer. This tutorial will cover how to use some of the customizable projections as well as how to use our optimizer, and we'll also walk through how to export some of the lineups into lineups on FanDuel or on DraftKings. So let's start with the customizable projections. When you click our projections page, this is what you'll land on, which is essentially already the optimizer page. To flip it to the optimizer, you just need to select a slate, which is here in the bottom right. Up in the top left is where you can select the slate. But before we get into the slates, let's look at some of the features on the customizable projections. So you'll notice here, we'll walk through the different categories and what they mean. Obviously, you've got the positional eligibility. Our default here is on DraftKings. You can see that by the DraftKings salary, but if you wanted to flip it to FanDuel, you can flip it to a FanDuel slate and the positions will show there, the salaries will show there. And then once you have it on the optimizer page, you'll have these available to you as well that we'll talk a little bit more about. But here on the default page, if you're just using the customizable projections to get new projection sets for players, you can see that you have these different categories at your disposal, these fields to be able to edit. Now up top here, unlike our NFL projections, our NFL projections are top down, so they start at the expected score level and work down and funnel projections to the players. Our NBA projections are bottom up. So as a result, we do not have editable fields on these totals, but they are on the display, and you can simply check or uncheck teams if you want to remove them from projections when you're building out your lineups or your player pools. So nothing's editable up here, except you can drop teams from the projection set should you choose to edit. Over here, you've got the team that the player plays for. James Harden plays for Houston. The opponent tonight, they play versus Memphis. You can see the @ if they're on the road, like John Wall's in Denver tonight. Then you have these categories. UR stands for usage rate. This is simply the percentage of possessions that a player is using while they're on the floor with their teammates. And basically, the more usage rate, the more opportunity for DFS points. The less usage rate, the less opportunity for DFS points. Certain players, their DFS points correlate stronger to their usage rate than other players. It just depends on how much of your scoring is, your DFS scoring is dependent on scoring and so on and so forth. Then we've got RR, which is rebound rate. This is the percentage of available rebounds that you're responsible for while your team is on the floor. So James Harden, we have a projection of 11.4. Giannis, a little bit better rebounder, up at 15. Some of the best rebounders in the league. Dwight Howard up over 20. AR is assist rate, and this is an estimate. We use the basketball reference definition, which is an estimate of the assists on the percentage of field goals while your team is on the floor, basically. James Harden, we've got for an assist rate of 55. A Dwight Howard, we have for like a 9 or a 10. The higher the assist rate, the higher the rebound rate, the higher the usage rate. This all pushes up the projection. The higher the rates go, the projection goes higher because you're getting a more substantial portion of your team's pie, whether it be usage or rebounds or assists. We also have min, which stands for minutes. So we've got James Harden projected for 37 minutes. You can do decimals here, so you can do 37.5. You can go up or down based on the toggle as well, 38 to 37, so on and so forth. And then we have EA, which is an efficiency adjustment. And this is a little bit, this is not an advanced statistical term in the NBA, but this is just something we use for our projections. And basically, it's a percentage bump on the projection. So, 62.91 for Harden. Let's say I thought for some reason that was 10 percentage points too low. I would bump by 10%, and I'd get, 6.3 points added onto the projection. So every time you're bumping this, you're going up 1% or down 1 percentage point. It's just moving the projection. The reasons you might use the efficiency adjustment, sometimes we use it as a secondary check on when we're adding up all the outputs of our teams, how that relates to the team total. If we're substantially different than the team total, there might be something in our DVP that isn't particularly catching well in terms of the pace of play or in terms of the ease of the matchup. So we might use that to adjust efficiency. Or sometimes when a team is really decimated with injuries and players are going to assume a more substantial role, oftentimes when players increase their usage, their efficiency comes down as well. So sometimes you'll see when teams are really injured and banged up and maybe they only have 8 players that night, a bunch of these players will be popping in their projections. We'll actually downgrade the efficiency a little bit to mitigate for some of that risk that when you increase a player's usage, typically you decrease their efficiency. So when you make changes, you'll see a little arrow pop up here. And this arrow as you can see, it says reset to DR baselines. So I've seen this change with James Harden where I've got him to 39 minutes and that pushed him up to 66 DraftKings points. But if I want to go back to the original projection, I just click that button and it goes to 62.91, the original. It also has a toggle back to go to the very last edit that I had, 39 minutes there. If you would like to save your edits, you simply click save. And then when you refresh the page and when you come back in, those edits will be saved. So you'll have James Harden now at 39 minutes. Again, the arrow can toggle right back if you want, back to 37, but you have that ability to save your edits while you're going through. If you need to reset, you want to destroy all the edits that you've made, you just hit the reset button and it'll reset back to the last edit that you had. So you can also export the bumps, which is just bringing the projections into an Excel file, or CSV, where it'll give you the minutes, the usage rate, the rebound rate, the assist rate, the FanDuel salary, the FanDuel points. This is an easy way that if you need the data in Excel or a CSV you can use with, and so on and so forth. So that's all the different ways that you can go about editing the customizable projections. This is important because if you have differences of opinions from our baselines, you can actually layer that in. You can also test out specific game scenarios. So let's say you want to look at Denver tonight, and let's say you think Nikola Jokic is going to get in foul trouble, so you take him down to 22 minutes or 24 minutes because he's going to get into foul trouble, and you say Mason Plumlee is going to get 26 minutes instead. Well, Mason Plumlee now all of a sudden is a huge value. So you can test out scenarios, and when you save them, you can eventually optimize off them as well. So the ability to edit the projections and then use them in the customizer as well to funnel into the optimizer is really important. So let's take a look at how to use the optimizer. The first thing is all your instructions are going to come at the bottom right here. So this says select a slate to optimize. I go up to select slate. I'll do DraftKings main slate. We'll optimize there. And then you'll see the check mark and the little bullseye icon appear all of a sudden. So what these icons are doing, and you can see it held my changes on Jokic. I've got him down to 24 minutes here. I can always revert back real quickly if I want to, but that allows me the ability to go back. So I've got all of these players now. They're all check marked in, and that means they're all in consideration for my player pool. But the way that you can manage your player pool is you can remove players from here. Like let's say, okay, I don't want Jokic in tonight. I think he's going to get in foul trouble. I remove him. That'll gray him out. But I definitely want Giannis in my lineups tonight. So I'm going to target Giannis, and that'll remove the checkbox. But since he's targeted, he will end up in your final player pool. Now we allow 8 targets for each of the positions. So what I like to do is I like to go through each position after I've done all of my edits. Now my edits are all on site for you guys to see because these are projections that we work on as a team here at DailyRoto. But whatever edits you might want to use, sometimes I'll make ones for different game scenarios that I can export on my own, but our baselines are always there for you to use. If you make any of those edits, they will carry over. I go through the point guard spot after I make all my edits, and I pick the 8 players that I want, and I'll often sort by value to see who's kind of popping up. I generally want to get a mix of cheap players, expensive players, and mid-tier players because I want to give the optimizer lots of different options to be able to create different combinations. So I've got Giannis in here. He's a pretty expensive player. Let me find a value play. Oh, here's Malcolm Delaney at 3,000. I'll include him. Then get some mid-tier guys, Mike Conley at 7,700. I'll include him. Kyle Lowry looks a little underpriced at 7,300. We'll include him. Get another value play with Della Vadova in here with Malcolm Brogdon out tonight. Maybe some Steph Curry. And I'll go through and I'll start adding targets at each position. And you'll see the players with multiple position eligibility will carry over. I do want some James Harden tonight, so let me include him. I'll go through and I'll just keep making these edits as I go through, making sure that I have a good mix of cheap players, expensive players, mid-tier players, so that I can get a good representative sample of different lineups as I'm going through this process. So we'll keep going through that. We'll make a couple more additions that I want in my lineups tonight. I want to make sure I have some John Collins. He looks like a good permanent producer. I've bumped up Mason Plumlee because of that Jokic expected foul trouble, so I'm going to get him in there. I want to have James Johnson in there. And from there, oh, and I also forgot to mention this part of the projections. You can also check, we have average projections, but we also have floor and ceiling projections associated. And now you can see the value thresholds for the floor and the ceiling change a little bit, but or don't change, excuse me. But you can see the points, how they compare to value for players' floors, and you can sort by highest level of floor and lowest level of floor. In this instance, if I'm giving Mason Plumlee 26 minutes, he's got a much better floor than he usually does. So as you adjust the projections on the minute side, the floor will expand as well, and then ceiling projections for all players as well. If you wanted to test out who has the highest ceiling at the power forward eligible position tonight, it is Joel Embiid. So you can optimize off of any of these different projection sets that you're kind of working through. I'm going to work through the average. I'm going to start my sim. And from here, it takes me to this funky looking page where I'm not really sure what I'm looking at first. So let's walk through this. The first thing is it gives you each different position that you're going through. It gives you the number of players that you want to use at those different positions. Now, I'm going to use 8, which is the default. Generally, we don't want you going too far above that as it'll have speed issues on the optimizer. Usually, you want to try to narrow your player pool on the optimizer down a little bit. I'll just use the defaults there. Then what it's saying is between value and points, what am I optimizing? At the center position, if there were a lot of values on the slate, maybe you'd want to optimize more toward the value side. If there were a lot of high-priced players that you wanted to use at the center position, you could optimize towards points. I'm going to go somewhere in the middle. I'm going to go a little bit more towards value at the center position. I know the shooting guard position, I've got James Harden tonight, so I want to have a little bit of emphasis on the high end. Small forward, I want to go really high because I have Giannis in the player pool. Point guard, I want to go upper end because Harden and Giannis are in there. But I also have Malcolm Delaney. He's really cheap. Power forward, I'm going to go right in the middle. Then it gives you a salary floor. I always move that to 45,000. Obviously, you just want to have lineups that are creating, highest salary possible in NBA. This can go up to 50,000. We're going to work on the slide bars eventually here, but then you have an ability to create up to 15,000 lines. Some of you might want just 10. Some of you might want 50. Some of you might want 100. I'm going to create, let's say, 100 lines here, and I'll use my little arrow bar to shift over. My next step is it's going to tell me who's in my player pool tonight. And it's going to show me how it's ranking these players. And so in my player pool, I'm going to get a lot of John Collins. I'm going to get a lot of Mason Plumlee. I'm going to get a lot of James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Not quite as much Malcolm Delaney because I'm optimizing for points over value at the point guard position and so on and so forth. From this point here, you see all the players that are in your player pool. If there are players that you don't want in your player pool that are on here, you can go back. And by going back, you can simply remove them from the player pool. So let's say, Marc Gasol, I don't want him in the player pool all of a sudden. So then I go back through the process. It holds my saves that I made before. And I go back here, and now Marc Gasol won't be in my player pool. From there, I decide, okay, I've got my player pool the way I want it. I've got my projections edited the way that I want it. Let's make some lineups. So I click this Generate Lines button. It says processing, do not leave this page. And that just means it's going to take a minute or two to generate all the lineups. So just hang tight while it's generating the lineups. Go get some water, take a little bit of a break, and eventually it will generate some of these lineups for you. All right, so then it'll pop up with download lines. My lineups are ready. It gives them to me in a CSV file. When I open up the CSV file, it shows me the lines, the lineups, the projection right here, the salary for the lineups, and then it gives me the slate IDs for these players. So now I created these lineups for the DraftKings main slate. So all these slate IDs correspond to the DraftKings main slate. It then shows me the ownership percentage of the players that I've included in these lineups. You can see it's giving me tons of James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo and John Collins and Malcolm Delaney. These are some of the best values on the slate for us. And now I have all my lineups. So the question is, how do I get from these lineups to putting them on DraftKings? So let's take you over to DraftKings. And what you'll do is you'll go to the My Lineups tab, and then you'll go to Edit Entries, which is up at the top. From there, you pick your sport. So I go to NBA, you pick your game type. I have Classic and Pick'em games registered. I have 442 entries registered under Classic. I will download this file. Can save that onto my desktop. Open up that file, and you can see this has all the different entries that I'm playing on this given night with the dummy lineup I have in here with Fred VanVleet and Frank Mason and so on and so forth. What I want to do in this game is figure out, okay, I have made 100 lineups and I've registered 100 entries in this Return the Court $33 contest. So I go back to my lines CSV, I take the slate IDs from the lineups, I copy them over, and I drag them down. So I have all my 100 lineups. I copy them and I paste into here. And now I have these all in the slate IDs in my lineups. So what I do then is I save this file. I save it for me in a special place called DFS exports, where I know where to get it. Then I get out of this file, and I go back to DraftKings and I upload. And when I upload those entries, voila, my lineups are there. I go to the My Lineups page. And all of a sudden you can see I now only have 342 entries with this lineup, my dummy lineup, and I now have 100 lineups in that one contest. And so they're all edited there and you're able to see them.